Hello, I'd like to welcome you to this month's AARP on Tap. I'm Kathi Schwan, North Dakota Volunteer State President, and today we're going to talk about the June 14th primary election. There was a lot of interest in it, although it did show a low voter turnout. I really feel that 50 plus block came out in droves because the people I talked to had copies of their ballot. They were well informed. They knew about early voting. They knew what was on the ballot. They attended some of the events related to the election. So today we're going to hear about a debrief from Janelle Moos, AARP North Dakota's Advocacy Director on the primary election. Welcome, Janelle.
Hi, Kathi. Thanks for having me on today. It's good to see you.
I'm very happy to be here. All the things that came up in the primary really is more localized than what people typically think about elections. So there was a lot going on in all the local races, and it's interesting to see what the outcomes were. Can you give us kind of a lowdown on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Starting back in February, we just started to talk about why voting in the primary was important. And we thought about different ways that we can engage, members in communities where, I know you've been following the West Fargo and Fargo races pretty closely, but we saw a lot of interest in being part of local leadership. And so, our work really was focused on how can we make communities age-friendly, or more livable. So how do you make your streets in West Fargo safer for biking and walking? How do you make food more accessible to it? And we really wanted to make sure our members understood voting in the primary was super important because those county commissioners, the city commissioners, park board, the mayors, they make the decisions locally. And I think you can work hand in hand to help shape the future of your community. And I think you're right. I think we engaged in a pretty robust effort to get our members in those communities involved in local elections.
I think it was great that AARP sent out the postcards to make it easy to vote. And, really North Dakota is really fortunate because it is easy to vote with the early voting, the absentee ballots. There's so many things, the drop box. There's so many opportunities that if you don't vote, there is no good reason why you didn't.
Yeah, that was our hope. We wanted to make sure that voters knew who was on the ballot, what was on the ballot, and they had the tools and resources to do that. So, no matter if you wanted to vote absentee or if you wanted to be there early voting or in person on the day of the election, we wanted to make sure that voters knew their voice mattered. And I think those postcards you talked about, you ran into a lot of people that had those postcards and showed them off. And, we wanted to make sure that you as a voter made sure that candidates, as they came door to door, they knew what was important to you as a 50 plus voter, or if you wanted to vote from your kitchen table, you could do that. And we really tried to make it as easy and accessible. And I think those letters to candidates, you talk about seeing your neighbors have the postcards. We started to hear from candidates. We sent out letters to them and shared with them, our work on voter engagement. And we showed some results from a questionnaire that we did with 50 plus voters in North Dakota. And they started to talk about those things when they were involved in candidate forums, either with the League of Women Voters or they would call me and ask questions about, really, this is what's important to 50 plus voters. One of them that I know that you're super invested in West Fargo is the access to healthy food. There were other things that showed up too that I think you're pretty interested in as well.
Yeah, and there's one thing about voting that is so nice to have that absentee ballot mailed to you because until you get that, you may not really appreciate if you haven't done any homework on who the candidates are. You get a chance to hurry up and do a little bit of research to see if that's the candidate you want to vote for. And I realize North Dakota is one of these states that has the straight ticket. But when you flip that ballot over and you see all those local races, you really want to know who you're voting for, what they stand for, and if their thoughts and interests match what's important to you. So it was a good primary. And we look forward to the general election this fall.
Yeah, I think you really hit on a good point, is that, the June primary is the time to elect local leaders. And we have a lot of, volunteers, and I know you're super involved in local work in the West Fargo area, but that shapes the future of the community. A lot of things are happening in communities, like, how do I stay in my house longer? How do I stay in my community longer? That's happens at the local level. And I think what we saw in the 6 communities we focused in, so in Bismarck and Fargo, the city commission races, there were some contested races, as well as in the mayoral contests. Mandan, they had a couple of different contested races for the school board. But Fargo really was the hot ticket to watch. There was the most they've ever had in terms of mayoral candidates. They had a significant number of folks running for the city commission. And I think what that tells me is that people are super engaged in their local community and want to be part of leadership. They want to be part of local decision making. And what we really try to encourage, our members in those 6 communities we focused on, is that you can have a role in this, and you have a voice to help shape, what's important to you in your community now and into the future. So what I was excited to see is that, Bismarck and Manant are both going to be welcoming new mayors into the office. There's a couple of new city commission members. Fargo, they did retain their and West Fargo, the mayors were reelected to those positions. But I think it's just tremendous to see new faces and incumbents. And I think what we have is an opportunity really for our members and citizens to shape those communities and help focus on issues that are important to them.
I really have to give a nod to the League of Women Voters, who joined us last month to talk about the different forums that they were conducting in order to let people hear the candidates firsthand and ask them questions and really get involved with why their vote mattered and what that candidate had to offer. So that was a real plus. So
it was, yeah, it was a plus. And I think what you just mentioned is really important. I think a lot of people don't think primary elections are important, even though we had a fairly low turnout. I mean, there were, I think, 15%, turned out to the primary. And I even had a conversation with my husband the day of the primary, and he's like, well, does it really matter? And so I had to talk with him about why it was important to go to the primary. But I think what we saw, Kathi, was that what we pushed this primary election season was that your voice does matter and every vote counts. And I was looking at some of the races. There's a Minot legislative race that is down to 1 vote. There'll be a mandatory recount for that seat to move on to the general election. There's a school board race here in Bismarck that was just separated by 3 votes. So I think if anyone questions the importance of voting, not only in the primary, but in the general, but does my voice really count? It does. When we have races coming down to 1 and 3 vote differences, I think, what the League of Women Voters did and what you and I have been, encouraging is that get out there and vote, whatever it looks like, in person, early, at your kitchen table, whatever it looks like. We wanted to make sure that you had the tools to do that.
And I think that taking advantage of the different opportunities to go to a League of Women Voter forum or an AARP sponsored version of that, especially coming up this fall, is important, because you just don't see. I know I live in an area where I expected to see more knocking on the door, but I really didn't see it. And so I'm expecting that the forums have become more important to those candidates to try and reach as many people as possible. I saw a lot of Facebook Live for candidates too. So they're using more technology and other opportunities to get out in front of people who they're requesting their vote. So it was a pretty exciting primary election nonetheless.
Yeah, you're right. And I think technology, it can be your friend and it can be your foe, but we're coming to you from Zoom today. You're in West Fargo, I'm in Bismarck. And I think what we want everyone to know is that all of these programs that we've done with the League of Women Voters or the candidate forums or what we have coming up, everything's on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and look at them. So if you're curious about voting in the general election, a lot of the information we presented during the primary, specifically on redistricting, applies. So you can go back and watch some of those videos at your convenience on our YouTube channel. So.
As we wrap it up today, Janelle, do you have a slide of some of the upcoming activities?
I do. Let me pull that up for you, Kathy.
I know one of the things that is important to AARP membership is shredding. And we recently had a shredding event here in Fargo, and it was one of the first opportunities we've had to do things in person. I saw so many of the cars that drove into the shredding event where all they had to do was pop their trunk, and the Minn Kota took the items out of their trunk, and they were waving the postcard that they received in the mail at me just to show that they got it. But we had a very really exciting turnout for our shredding event, and I would expect we're going to see the same in the other communities where we do this. On June 22nd at 11 a.m., there's a Fort Ransom hiking day trip, and that's an in-person event. And if you've ever used a QR code, just scan that with your smartphone and you'll get all the details for these events. And on the 13th of July at 5 o'clock, there's going to be a Fitlot grand opening in Bismarck. Fitlot is an AARP exercise event that is well known in any of the states where AARP is located, where they put these in. And so this will be the first one for North Dakota. So if you're in the Bismarck area, come on July 13th at 5 o'clock for the dedication for that. And on July 19th, from 3 to 7 p.m., there's going to be a shredding event in Grand Forks. Gather up the shredding items that you've maybe accumulated over the last couple of years since we've had our last one. And don't throw credit card solicitations and things in the garbage or in your regular trash or recycling. Save those for these shredding events. You don't want your personal information out there. And AARP takes extra care to make sure that these are disposed of where you don't have to worry about any of the fraud or identity issues with that. So watch for additional items coming up as we get back to in-person events at AARP.
Yeah, we're really excited to be back out in communities. So look for other things in lots of the communities coming up. And we're excited to see you guys coming up soon in West Fargo as well. So
thanks for joining me today, Janelle. Good information.
Thank you, Kathy. Bye-bye.
Bye.